Hello, everyone. This is Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to This Week in Bitcoin. Today is March the 8th, 2019. Strong hand, long-term thinking, unconfiscatable. Bitcoin is the next Bitcoin. One Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. All right, all you long-term thinkers. We got a show for you today. We don't know where Mustap Murad is, but he should appear at any moment. You never know. But we got Udi in Israel, where I am, and we've got Boris. He's where you're in the Netherlands now, right?
Amsterdam. Yep.
Yes. Okay. So Udi's been all over Twitter lately. All these guys' Twitters are all linked to below. So find out more about them that way. We'll talk about specific things they're getting into in a second. But Udi is known for his hilarious Twitter comments, and he's been talking a lot about what a lot of people have been talking about this week, the delete Coinbase, I guess, theme on Twitter. And well, I mean, give us a broad overview of it. I would say, why is it important, and what exactly was it, and did it succeed in what you were trying to do?
Yeah, so I guess about 2 or 3 weeks ago, Coinbase announced the acquisition of Neutrino, which is some sort of a blockchain intelligence or analysis company similar to Chainalysis and other companies like that. And I guess this is generally an acquisition of a company like that makes sense for Coinbase because that's one of the things they have to do as a regulated exchange. However, within like a week or so, a lot of people started to bring up the history of the leadership and the executive team of Neutrino, which were involved in Hacking Team, which is another Italian company that had a history of selling spyware to governments and oppressive regimes who were tracking journalists and human rights activists and so on. And actually, the spyware made by Hacking Team helped to jail these people, and perhaps worse than that. So those are some, morally questionable people with morally questionable pasts. And I think that the thing that, really made a lot of people uncomfortable was this issue of having them get access to financial data inside of Coinbase. So Coinbase, kind of gave them the task to spy on their own users, on their own customers. And it makes sense that Coinbase would want to track their users, but you would not want to have these kind of people have access to this data, I believe. So this was what bothered me personally, and I think this is what bothered a lot of people. So this is what started the kind of delete Coinbase movement. A lot of people were posting and tweeting screenshots of them closing their Coinbase accounts, which, by the way, over time became difficult. It seemed like Coinbase might be making it difficult for people to close their accounts, perhaps because this movement started moving. And eventually, Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, had this statement where he said that he reassessed some things based on this movement, and they decided to, the way he phrased that was, he decided to, what was it? I think, I forget the word. He didn't say that he's going to fire the people who were from Neutrino. He said that they were going to, I don't know. There was some obscure term which I should look up where he said that they wouldn't be part of the company anymore at some point.
There was not finality toward it. It wasn't like
not finality and not clear schedule, and it wasn't clear who exactly is being let go, and are they going to have some business relationships when they're out of the company. So it wasn't 100% clear, but it's a step forward. I mean, they did listen in a way. They did acknowledge that this was a mistake, so that's something. But yeah, I think we would want to see more clarity on that for sure.
Well, here's the thing. So you're saying they were spying on their users, but aren't all the exchanges doing this? And and you'll say, well, these guys that they had working there were like the worst of the worst, I guess. But for me, it was more of like a public awareness campaign that everyone should know that all of the exchanges are doing this. Right. And at the same time, you understand why Coinbase does. I mean, they've chosen this route. I mean, I guess let the market decide is what I say. If people want to be spied on, I mean, people don't care anymore. Some
people don't care. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, okay. So, is there a next step? Are you happy with this conclusion? Or
I mean, I'm happy that people are more aware. That's for sure. I'm happy that people realize that this is happening. I think that there's now a good time to discuss what this kind of kind of tracking means, practically for people. And there are some practical meaning here. People don't think about, let's say you were a large trader, right? Let's say you were a meaningful, significant trader who does a lot of trades and a lot of volume, right? Companies like this can gather data from a lot of exchanges and use that to try to figure out your trading strategy, for example, to try to front run you and make trades before you get to them, because they have information on what you're doing on other exchanges too. So they can actually beat your strategy. So if you're a trader at Coinbase, this might cost you money. Maybe you don't care about your privacy at all, but this might actually cost you money because insiders can see your data and beat you at your own game. So, these things are valuable. They have value. So, yeah.
All right, now that's a very interesting point. I hadn't heard that before, and I think some of the impulsive traders, that might make them a lot less impulsive. But okay, so there was also something that came out in all this, that they had been selling users information before, so that's why they got this new spy company.
Right.
That was also disturbing.
To say the least. Yeah.
but that's the thing. Who I'm sure other exchanges are using that previous. We don't know who they were using beforehand, and people have come up with theories. But again, it seems like it's the Wild West out there. I would assume if you're dealing with many exchanges, that they're selling your information. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, I would assume that too. They would probably say that they're not. But there's a difference between, they would say probably they don't sell like your full name to someone else, and maybe that's true. But in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Your full name is not the thing that matters. What matters is the connections they can make between your transactions to an entity, and whether or not they attach a name to that entity or not. Just knowing that this is one entity is very valuable. Because this is financial data. This is very valuable, and someone else can attach a name to that entity. It doesn't matter. This is not the difficult part. So, yeah.
I would say that I'll say this also. And here in Israel, and I'm going to tie it in a little bit. A few people have asked me for cheaper. There's not a cheap way, they say, to buy Coinbase, to buy Bitcoin here. And in America, there's only so many onboarding options also. So this is another issue. If Bitcoin becomes mainstream popular again, people start hearing about it, there are going to be people that want to get into it, and the easiest options for people are places like this. And I know it presents a conundrum of sorts. Where, and again, if people came up with a cheaper, people are tired of paying high fees for some of these exchanges. Well, if some exchanges came up with lower fees and made it more accessible, then more people would get on. But at the same time, they would probably make it more spy worthy also. So I don't know. It's just something I was thinking about there. That there's a lot of different directions that this can all go in, and I think we're still going to have a lot of people giving up information for convenience and for cheapness, for just to save on some fees. So I don't know, Udi, if you have anything to say about that.
I mean, actually, in my experience in Israel in the last few months, the Bitcoin market price is actually lower than it is in most of the world. So if you hold some Bitcoin and you want to get rid of them, you probably get a worse price here than you would get in many other places. I think this has a lot to do with the way the banking system works here and the difficulty of getting fiat money into Israel from other countries. But it makes arbitrage opportunities more difficult than in other places. Yeah, I mean, obviously, in any country, in any place, if you're going to use a regulated exchange, then you're going to be tracked, and people should be aware of that and make their own decision. But there are other ways to get Bitcoin. This isn't the only way, and some people would say that it's easier to get Bitcoin with cash. Each one has their own preferences, but it's not the only way. That's for sure.
All right, Boris, we've said so much here. Your turn to chime in on this situation.
Yeah,
and I mean, privacy and whatnot. Please.
I think there's a couple of issues. To start, I think most people who use Coinbase use it to purchase their first Bitcoin, or maybe do their first purchase, or basically they're just using the ecosystem for the first time. And when you're doing that, you're never thinking about the consequences on a long term. So you might spend, I don't know, $100 worth of Bitcoin and just try it out, only to find out that in a couple of years, that $100 has become worth a lot of money. And I know someone in the Netherlands here who had that. Basically, the problem, he bought a lot of Bitcoin way back in the day, didn't spend more than a few $100s, but it was a significant, I mean, 1,000+ Bitcoin. And when the Bcash fork came, he split and sent it to Coinbase, and basically sold it and got his Bitcoin back. And at that moment, he basically doxed himself. It turns out that the Dutch IRS office is one of the purchasers of this information from Coinbase. So they asked him very specific questions about where the Bitcoin Cash came from, where the Bitcoin went to, basically the chain analysis starting from his just that one Coinbase transaction, doxed his complete assets. It was incredible. And he never thought about it because he wasn't active in the Bitcoin community. He never really realized what privacy means. And that's a problem with privacy. You tend to underestimate the value of it until it's too late. And then there's no way back. And that's the thing with Coinbase. I mean, they've got 25 million users and all of them were doxed. All their information was sold to whomever. I mean, there's no way to tell who it was sold to, but just imagine who it could be sold to. And this is a big problem, I think, for everybody who ever used a service like Coinbase. And on the other hand, I think the real problem with this, I mean, everybody should figure out what this means for themselves. But the big problem is that these very large companies are so incredibly tone deaf to basically to the criticism from the community. And I see this in video games a lot too, like companies like EA and Activision, and they basically they publish these games that are broken. The community goes buck wild over these broken games, and they completely ignore all the criticism. They don't even react to it. And this is something that's really interesting because I think there was somewhere on Twitter I saw a response from some lady who's a PR executive, maybe working with Coinbase, and she said for a big company like Coinbase, it's really important to once something like this happens, some PR disaster like this, you have to start communicating with the community, because otherwise you lose grip on the discussion. You lose the topic, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, just the fact that you have something like a hashtag delete Coinbase, this is deadly for in PR terms for companies like this. And in that respect, I mean, maybe it's a little bit of an American culture. I think companies in Europe tend to be more communicative when it comes to these sorts of problems. But in America, it seems like all the PR departments of these kind of companies, that just freeze up. They just have no idea what they should do. They don't see anything out of fear of saying something wrong that makes a problem worse. And yeah, and this Coinbase, I think this Coinbase will exist for a long time, but this is the end of Coinbase because people will wake up to the fact that there's probably better alternatives, and there are now better alternatives. And if you look at Europe and especially the Netherlands, I mean, we've had way better alternatives for getting Bitcoin than the options that you have in the US. So I think most Americans start to find out that there's different alternatives that are better and probably more privacy friendly. But I'm not sure about that. But I can imagine that there's better options.
Well, it goes back. I don't know if this is the end of Coinbase. I think the ease of use and just the newbies needing to be onboarded easily, it will prop them up. I don't. I think this will be a bump in the road. There'll be people have they don't have long memories, especially people who aren't in the space yet. Udi, do you think this is the end of Coinbase or?
No, I don't think it's the end of Coinbase. I also wouldn't want it to be, right. What I would prefer to see is to see Coinbase get better at this and to respect their customers and their customers' privacy more. And unlike a lot of people say about Facebook that it doesn't matter what Facebook leaders will say. Facebook cannot respect privacy of their users because that's not the way they're built. And I'm not sure that this kind of a thing is true for Coinbase as well, because Coinbase, it's a company that serves customers who buy cryptocurrencies and they make money off that. So I do think that there is an opportunity for a change there when Coinbase realizes that if they treat their customers well, they might stay and they might be able to grow their business. And it might be beneficial to everyone involved that they do these things in a way that's better for the customers as well. So that's what I would like to see. I don't want to see Coinbase disappear. But also, there are a lot of other companies now. You have Square Cash in the States is doing very interesting things for allowing people to very easily buy Bitcoins with a nice interface and so on. So Coinbase is not the only one doing that. I hear Americans saying good things about Gemini too. So that's in the state side. And all around the world, there are new exchanges popping up. So I think that we'll keep seeing more and more alternatives. So no, I don't think Coinbase will disappear, but I think that, their early advantage of having a nice user interface, people will catch up to that. Other businesses will catch up to that and become better at that. So yeah, we already have alternatives, and I think we will have better alternatives with time. And we also have alternatives for people who are very cautious about privacy, very privacy aware, like Bisq, like Hodl, and so on. So you have a few local Bitcoins competitors too that have less strict KYC restrictions. So yeah, there are a lot of options now.
Yeah, I do recommend people who do mess around in altcoins and whatnot, and that is risky and it's gambling, to try out Bisq. Let this be a time where you're like, let me try something different. Learn the Bisq skill. It is an inch. I have opened it up and checked it out. It's very intriguing, and I think it could be big. I mean, it's definitely in the early stages. I mean, there's not a lot of volume on Bisq. There's not, and it's not for newbies. And Coinbase is. So okay. Well, I want to talk more about, since we're talking about privacy. This came up on my show yesterday. I sent you guys the article about the Canadian Tax Authority sending certain Canadians that they know have cryptocurrency a questionnaire, a very invasive questionnaire, asking them all about their public addresses and have they used Shapeshift. It was disturbing. Boris, thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's really disturbing, and it doesn't surprise me. We all know that these governments, or at least the IRS, the tax offices, they really need this information. What I find strange is that they don't just buy it. I mean, there's companies who are offering this information, like Chain Analysis or Coinbase that we just discussed. It's weird that they don't just buy it and they ask people for it. And the interesting part is what is the information that they're missing. So I can imagine that they have all this this information about addresses and amounts of Bitcoin. But I can imagine that I once read an article about Israeli company that does a lot of chain analysis. They're really good at it, and they get most of their information from the metadata. So it's not just the exchanges; it's your social media. It's basically all your official accounts. They're all getting pasted together, and with that they kind of find out, hey, Murat is here. Great.
Yeah. No, keep going. Keep going.
Awesome. Well, so I guess these they need this information, and the more information you have, the more conclusions you can get from that. So basically, I think they are asking for metadata. So if you give up your some address that you once used, you will probably dox most of the addresses that you will use, unless you take extreme measures to sort of circumvent that. And most people won't do that. Yeah, so that's I think this is mostly about like getting information and starting up their investigation in how they should deal with cryptocurrencies. And I think most tax offices are struggling right now because there's just not a lot of knowledge around there.
All right, I want everybody to pound that like button because Murad is in the house. We'll get to him in a second. Remember, everyone's linked to below. Udi, you were nodding your head during a lot of that. What information do the Canadian tax authorities not have? Or do they just, instead of buying it, they're just going to scare people into giving it to them for free? I think maybe that's the reason.
Yeah, so first of all, I agree that it's not a surprise, that they want this information. And to me, well, I mean, actually, I wasn't surprised by any of this, but I think for a lot of people, what was very surprising is how knowledgeable they are. If you go through the questions, you see that they know what they're talking about. They know what questions to ask, they know what to expect, and they know the terms, they know what they mean, they know, what people are likely to be doing. So I think that a lot of people felt for years that they're kind of under the radar and no one's going to figure out how any of this works. But, it seems that the authorities in the last 2 or 3 years, they have a very good understanding of how this world functions. So I think this maybe surprised some people. As to what kind of information they have and what kind of information they're asking for, well, a lot of time tax authorities, what they do is they already know the answer, but they're going to ask you anyway because maybe you'll spill out more than they already know, and also it's a nice way to maybe cause other people to come forward as well. So it doesn't mean that they don't have the information. They just they want to hear you say it in a way. So yeah, it's not a surprise. It's not a surprise at all. And it's true that whatever kind of information you're going to give away, unless you're extremely careful, it's probably going to de-anonymize everything that you do. But I think that A, it's to be expected. B, I think that many people, a lot of us are law-abiding citizens, and we're ready for this moment, and everything is fine. If tax authorities want information, then a lot of people were aware that they're going to hand out this information at some point. So, that's probably something that some people were prepared for. But yeah, I think that this is a time where a lot of people will realize that early decisions that were made maybe even years ago, where privacy wasn't taken too seriously, are suddenly affecting their futures. And also, me personally, I'm not that concerned about tax authorities. Again, I think that a lot of us saw this coming and were prepared for that. But this also means that a lot of other people have access to your financial activities, not just the tax authorities. So the tax authorities can buy information. Anyone else can buy that information too if they have enough money to pay. And that's what I'm more concerned about. I'm concerned about how anyone can learn about your financial activity, not just the authorities. So yeah, that's what I'm more concerned about.
It's very interesting that they had Shapeshift actually listed on there, and
yeah.
I mean, they clearly have hired someone, at least one person who's been in the cryptocurrency space.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they've been doing those things for many, many years. It's not they don't, maybe they didn't understand cryptocurrency specifically, but they understand communities, they understand businesses, they understand those things. They know they need to get people who know something and you know, as a contractor or whatever, and learn about the businesses in this world. And it's not the first time they're doing it. I don't think that we should be surprised that this is happening.
All right. Murad, can you hear us? He's still having some technical issues over there. That's yeah, we'll work through that, Murad. I guess you can't hear us right now. All right, so we'll go
to that, Adam.
Oh yeah, Boris, please take it.
Yeah, what's interesting is the way they phrased it. I mean, if you read this questionnaire, it feels like you're like it's they're accusing you of something, and that's the problem I have. I mean, if I open a newspaper, I see an article about drug dealers using Bitcoin for money laundering. You know, it's the usual blah blah, and it feels like they sort of copied this narrative and use it towards people who need to pay their taxes. And I have a problem with that. And in the Netherlands, they go a step further. If you use services like tumblers or something like that, that's an official indication for money laundering. So if you use something like that, you really need to know what you're doing. And the reality is that people will use something like that maybe in a Wasabi wallet, or just add some extra privacy. They have no idea what they're doing, and it's being judged by someone at a tax office as being something that's related to money laundering, which shouldn't be the case. And then if you compare this to other assets, let's say you have some gold at home or some silver, are they going to ask you where you got it, what you did with it? Do you keep it in your basement or in a safe or in a vault, or do you keep it at the bank? I mean, it's nobody's business really. And because cryptocurrency is so new and Bitcoin is so new, they don't realize that it's basically none of their business. If you do your tax, if you do your taxes, you're just going to state what you have, what you earned, your property tax, whatever, in whatever country you live. You don't need to specify if it's Bitcoin or if it's some other coin, or if it's gold or whatever it is that you have. You just declare your value in Canadian dollars or in euros in Europe, whatever. That's it. That should be enough. And apparently, it's not really clear if that's enough, and that makes everybody a little bit uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable.
Well, there's going to be a, you know, legally in Canada, I'm not familiar with the law, but how much can they really is this an overstep? Did they ask too much? Are there some privacy issues involved? In America, I don't think this would pass. I think the ACLU would get involved. Who knows? I hope it doesn't come to this in America. I mean, I think I mean, I wouldn't like to get a questionnaire like that with 12 pages with 58. I mean, and you know, that was a great point that you made. It seems like it was written by the people who write those FUD articles.
Yeah.
It had that same tone to it. It had that same, like, you're a drug dealer, yeah. You know, to tell us why you're laundering money. Basically, it was saying. All right, Murad, can you hear us? All right. Do you have thoughts on this?
Yes.
On the Canadian privacy issue, on the Coinbase privacy issue, where we're getting into. Also in France, they said there was a French official that said they want to make anonymous coins illegal. We got a lot of privacy stuff going on.
I've been expecting this for a while. I've been saying that they're going to start demanding your Bitcoin. They're normalizing the destruction of cash. They're going to start normalizing negative interest rates. Being away and more, and it's just going to be in their total interest to turn the existing sort of a complete surveillance panopticon, so to speak. So it depends. We can essentially, as a community, build these technologies and put them into enough people. I do expect governments to be increasingly more competitive, increasingly more sort of aggressive about this stuff.
Yeah. Are you? Your main points came through there. It's still a little. It's definitely choppy on your end, so you might want to get rid of the video. Like, you can just do only sound. That might work. I don't know. The connection's a little Okay, there we go. We'll try. We'll get another question your way in a second. All right. So let's move on. We're talking about big corporate. Well, we're talking about Coinbase, which isn't the biggest of corporations. But one story that's actually from last week, and I just wanted to bring it up this week so you guys could chime in, is this Facebook coming up with their own coin. Positive or negative? I think right now they want to do a stable coin. Okay. I think it's a way to get more people. Well, I think more people will find out about cryptocurrency this way. I think that's good. I also think they'll eventually change their mind and it won't be a stable coin and it'll just be their own way to print their own money and to become as like powerful as a nation. So, Udi, did you have thoughts on Facebook coin and pro or con?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think we discussed this the last time I was on, but a lot happened since then.
Yeah.
So yeah, we keep hearing about this Facebook coin again and again, and Facebook is also talking a lot about privacy recently, and how they're trying to maybe become a company that respects privacy a little more. Yeah, I mean, the Facebook coin is all about, the rumors we hear about the Facebook coin are all about they putting coins, multiple currencies in some kind of a basket that will be pegged to some cryptocurrency. And the question I have about that is, as usual, why is it like a token? Why is it a blockchain? Why isn't it just a Venmo or PayPal competitor where you can, you have a database and you send the balance to your friends? What does the blockchain add? Because it's pretty obvious that you will have to do every KYC requirement imaginable and so on. And they will obviously keep the permission to confiscate your funds. And I'm not saying that this isn't useful. I'm sure it can be useful for some people. I'm just not sure what the blockchain part is all about. It seems like, I suspect that it's mostly about buzz and hype. And that's why they're using this word. So yeah, I'm not sure why we care about that.
It could be a way just to get around, to make it seem like they're not printing their own money.
To make it seem, that's the. I mean, how long can you? You can't lie to all of the people all of the time, right? How long is this ruse going to work? And also, they're not printing anything anyway. They're holding. Again, what the rumors say is that they're going to hold coins in custody and give you tokens for it. So that's just PayPal.
Yeah, that is step one, definitely. I'm just thinking maybe they get that off the ground. They have their little stable coin, which is, I mean, basically just PayPal, but then they'll take it to the next level. I mean,
remove the peg and create their own new world currency.
Yeah, why not? They aim high over there. That's why I'm bringing. That Breaker magazine did a story on this week. That's why I'm bringing it up again. I mean, again, it's been in the news. At first I didn't take it very seriously because it was just rumors, and now it's the rumors are getting a lot more substantial, and
right.
It definitely seems they've been talking to people, and that one day we're going to wake up and they're going to say they have something, and I'm trying to get myself ready to say, I'm trying to look on the bright side, and I think it'll get people into cryptocurrency. I think the smart people who don't know about Bitcoin right now will play around with the Facebook coin and then be like, well, wait, let me get the real thing. That's Bitcoin. So, but Boris, what do you have any thoughts on this, pro or con? Or
Yeah, I mean the same questions that Udi has. What I find really interesting is, I mean they've probably been looking to China. WeChat has a payment option, and it's got nothing to do with cryptocurrency. But basically, it's become a standard in China and also a little bit outside of China. And Facebook obviously wants to do something like that, and there's probably some challenges with regulations in the US, and this cryptocurrency thing might sort of navigate them around that. That could be. On the other hand, I mean, people are going to spend the money with the least worth at first. So that means that people are going to buy coffee with their Facebook coin, and they'll do their savings in Bitcoin. Just like Venezuela is teaching the people about Bitcoin by enforcing the petro. Same thing's going to happen with this.
Yeah. Excellent. Comparing it to the petro. I like that. Pound that like button. All right. I want to give everybody an update on Murad. He's got a real bad He's not in the USA right now. He's in a place with a bad internet connection, to say the least. So unfortunately, he won't be joining us again, right back on this show, but we'll have him on another day. Well, let's get into. I had some questions for him, but we'll talk about Boris's poll here, and it's linked to below, everybody. A poll that he sent out on Twitter. What value aspect of Bitcoin do you find most important? Technical, speculative, monetary, or political? And now, right now, monetary is winning, and I would think that's the case. And speculative kind of bleeds into monetary. I know the difference, but some people might get confused. But what's up with that poll, and what's your answer to it?
Well, I started this because I mean, I do a couple of podcasts and I talk to a lot of people about Bitcoin. And what I've noticed is that some people love it for the technical side of it. And when you challenge certain views, they use price as an argument for or against their, or basically to establish their argument. And I feel that you have to sort of like take all these separate subjects apart from each other. And what's interesting is that, I mean, I don't believe that Bitcoin has political value yet, but I believe that everybody who voted for a political value aspect of Bitcoin believes that that's something that we might be going to. I mean, I can imagine that when countries start to add Bitcoin to their national reserves, Bitcoin will absolutely have political value aspect. And I think it's important that people start to understand that there's different aspects of Bitcoin that you cannot really compare to each other. I mean, the whole Bitcoin maximalism discussion basically revolves around what your context is of viewing Bitcoin. I mean, I would proudly call myself a maximalist, but that's because I like the economic side of it. I mean, I've got front row seats for the revolution. That's why I like Bitcoin, and the technical aspect of it, and let alone the speculative assets, I really don't care too much about. I placed this poll, and it was sort of something to add on the interview that Peter McCormack did on the What Bitcoin Did podcast with Andreas Antonopoulos. And Andreas said what most Ethereum maximalists don't get, that the moment their token gains any form of monetary value, it loses its utility. And I find that fascinating. And most people don't realize that if you work with a utility token, or if you, it's sort of, I mean, people mix it together because it hasn't really proven itself. And if you look at the whole altcoin scene, this problem is everywhere. People build utility tokens, give it a monetary value, and think it'll be okay. It won't be okay. I mean, one of these value aspects is going to be dominant over the other ones. And you can even imagine that once Bitcoin gets 100% political value, everybody believes that it will lose its monetary value because nobody will be using it. People will be just hodling it until, I mean, for a couple of generations because it's so valuable. So I find it interesting to look from these different perspectives at Bitcoin. And I was just thinking, what do people think of that? And I was really surprised to see that 53% of everybody who filled in the poll, it's on 1,146 votes right now. Still 6 hours left. Over 1,000 people said, 53% of them said, yeah, monetary value is most important. And I agree. And I find it fascinating that people see that. People really are capable of judging Bitcoin for all that it is, because you need to understand every different value aspect to understand Bitcoin. This is also a challenge. It will take a couple of years. I'm sure it took us a couple of years to learn all these different aspects. And if you're starting Bitcoin, I think this is interesting because you probably start out thinking about tech, maybe speculative value, and not thinking about the monetary value. That comes later. And yeah, that's why I hope to make that a little bit of give that a visual with this poll.
Udi, thoughts on that? What value aspect of Bitcoin do you find most important?
I agree that it's the monetary value. I mean, I look at Bitcoin mostly as a digital asset that is unique because it's, you know, it behaves like a lot of other physical assets, like gold, but it's digital, and it's unique in that it manages to simulate those qualities and maybe even be better at them. And I do think that the technical value is interesting, but only insofar as it manages to sustain Bitcoin as this sort of digital asset with a monetary policy that is unique. So the technicalities of Bitcoin are only interesting if you want to convince yourself that its monetary properties are robust and are actually working as you expect. Because just having those typed in some PDF file doesn't make it so. You need to understand how it works to convince yourself that it really works. But that's the only reason why the technicalities matter. And similarly, the more political and the more community side of things is also important, because it also plays a part in making this asset what it is. But again, they're only interesting insofar as they help you understand why the asset functions. What's really important is the digital asset, Bitcoin itself, and its monetary policy and its monetary properties. Yeah, I definitely agree that this is the most important thing about all of this.
All right, we're and the majority said the same thing. Pound that like button. Well, I want to talk about a technical aspect of Bitcoin right now. The Lightning Network. When I was at the Tel Aviv Bitcoin Embassy on Sunday, everybody was talking about how the Lightning Torch was being passed from someone associated with Iran who had gotten it from Iran, and it was being sent to the Tel Aviv Bitcoin Embassy, and it successfully. It went through, and it was people learned about the Lightning Torch. People learned about the Lightning Network. Udi, any insight? I thought it was a good gimmick. I thought it was a good way to get people involved with, aware of the Lightning Network. What about that? And also tell us some other Lightning news if you've got it.
Yeah. So the Lightning Torch, I think it's this sort of a very, very fun game, and a very fun way for the community to interact. And it's also a fun way for people to learn about Lightning for the first time, which is great. A lot of people installed and tried Lightning for the first time through that. Even people who didn't end up getting the torch, the so-called torch, they still went through a lot of the steps. They downloaded the wallet, they opened some channels, they learned what an invoice is, they tweeted it. So they learned about a lot of the moving parts, and now they understand Lightning better than before. So that's great. We also need to remember, though, I think that it's not very similar to what real-world use is going to look like, right? People aren't going to get a payment and send it to someone else who will just send it to someone else and so on, and tweet about it. This is not, and people are not going to pay each other just so that they can say that they use Lightning. We're hopeful that they're going to pay each other because they want to do some real actual economic activity, right? They really want to buy something. So the way that people will actually use Lightning is going to be significantly different than how this played out. And I wouldn't call this real-world use in any way. And I think it also brought up, things like custodial wallets and things like that a lot of people use that personally, I think they're nice. They're nice to look at, but, they're not why we're doing all this. I would say that for most people, if you're going to use a custodial wallet, then you lose your privacy, you lose your security, you lose your sovereignty. It's no longer trust minimized. You're trusting this company, so you kind of lose everything, right? The only thing that you get is you can claim that you made a Lightning transaction, but you lose all of the benefits. So yeah, I don't know if custodial wallets are a good way to recommend people to use Lightning, and I definitely try to recommend people to use the real wallets where they hold the funds themselves. So that's something that I hope that people will try. And also, buy real things. At the Bitcoin Embassy, you can buy beers and you can buy snacks with Lightning. When we did the Bitcoin party a few months ago, you could pay for hats and T-shirts and so on with Lightning. So this is something that I hope people will try more. As for what's going on in the more technical side, then some things that are interesting. One of them, I don't know if people might have heard the word wumbo thrown around. People sometimes use that. That's WUMBO. It's a word from SpongeBob, the TV show, but Lightning developers adapted it to mean Lightning channels that don't have a size limit. Right, so most Lightning channels today have a size limit of, I believe it's 0.16 Bitcoin, so 16 million Satoshis. But going forward, people will be able to open limitless channels. So this will enable, larger payments and so on. So this is something that's coming along. There's some work on enabling payments to to a person who publishes a public key instead of paying for an invoice. So if you tried Lightning in the past, you know that you have to, if you want to accept funds, you have to first generate an invoice, which is a random string, and it looks like a Bitcoin address, just longer, and you give it to someone, and then they pay the invoice, and you have to create an invoice for every payment you want to receive. So there's some user experience work on removing that step for people who don't want it. Although I think it's very useful, but if you don't want it, then you'll be able to just pay someone directly. And really, there's a lot going on in Lightning. There's now Eclair Mobile for Android, which is one of the Lightning wallets, is going to release support for receiving funds soon. Up until now, you could only send funds. So they have a wallet coming up that can receive funds too, which will make things much easier for people. People, things keep happening. It's hard to even keep up. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff.
Boris, real world use cases for Lightning. Thoughts on that? You always have ideas about Lightning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm a game journalist. I started out as a game journalist 20 years ago, and I think video games taught gamers about Bitcoin before Bitcoin even existed. But this Lightning demonstration, I think it's a demonstration by the community to show the world what Lightning can do. And it started out small, and then we got Jack Dorsey on board, and people were sending transactions from airplanes mid-air. Stuff like that was super cool. And even the transaction that you just mentioned from to Iran, which is there's a boycott going on by the US, which is not a small thing. So this is really interesting. When I was on your show 3 months ago, I mentioned that tipping.me just started. And it really launched a day before that, and everybody's like, yeah, okay, not a tipping service, whatever. Nobody really caught on to it. If we fast forward to today, 3 months later, there's 14,000 people who are actually using it. And I think if you use it, you're most likely to are close to or have already installed a Lightning node, and are probably figuring out how Lightning works. And it's fascinating. I love it. I love the way it works. And I mean, there's a whole thing in video games, and I think this is where I don't know if you know the technology director from Google. What's his name? He's from a Singularity project. Oh man, I forgot his name. He once said that video games are the harbinger of everything. And I think what we're seeing right now is that there is this race to get crypto into video games, and there's a lot of altcoins who are specializing in sort of like building tools for game developers to use this. And the thing with the Bitcoin community is that it's not so organized. So people who love video games or building video games might be able to build some tools, and I think there's some tools have already been built. But I think we're on the. I mean, if we talk 3 months from now, we'll see some really interesting examples. I mean, we have Koala Studio, but they're basically the only ones that are really talking about using Lightning in video games. And this is something that's it's going to take off in the next year. It's going to be incredible. But it's still in the phase that game developers need to understand every aspect of Bitcoin, not just some tool that they can use in their in the engine that they use. We need to take it one step further, and I think I mean, the people I talk to, the universities that I talk to, they're all getting interested. They're all understanding that this is the next step that they have to take. I mean, and to be honest, I mean, they're talking about crypto, but it's only going to be Lightning. That's the only interesting way to implement real monetary transactions in video games. This is going to be huge.
Yeah, I again, I like the combo of video games and crypto, and it will, if Bitcoin can be incorporated through the Lightning Network into video games, into some like must play video game, it'll be huge. It will be huge, and it'll happen. We just have to be patient. We have to be patient here. Now, I do like seeing people working on the Lightning Network, but I want to tie this into the beginning of the show again. We were talking about privacy, and this is something I forgot to bring up. I really hope some of the developers are working on some privacy solutions. I think this Connect Canada situation should really boost that to the top. You know, we've had scaling issues before. I think privacy is the big thing that the developer type of people out there should be thinking of how to make it so that Canada doesn't even want to ask you. Not make it impossible for Canada to know really what you have. I hope a solution like that can happen. And again, maybe it'll be developed in an altcoin like Monero or Zcash. I don't know, but yeah, that's I just thought of that here now at the end of the show. Anyway, let's tie it up here. Is there anything else that has to be discussed? Any story you want to bring up, Udi? Anything that was left out? Any privacy type of thing you want to comment on? Ethereum hard fork? Anything that happened? There were things.
Well, as far as privacy is related, then I think that Lightning should make things better, because if people use Lightning more for making payments, then you don't submit your transactions on chain, so not everyone sees them. Your counterparty knows about your transactions, but not everyone knows about them. So that's much better for your privacy. Not only where authorities are related, but just where everyone you're working with is related. You don't want your boss to know what you're using your salary on, and you don't want your you don't want your whoever it is you're paying rent on your house. You don't want them to know what your salary is. You don't want your coworkers to know what your salary is. There's a lot of things that you would want to keep private. So yeah, Lightning should help with that a lot. And there are things coming to Bitcoin that should improve that for on-chain as well. So once Schnorr is in, then with time, a lot of transactions will be able to look the same. Multi-sig transactions, Lightning transactions, various kind of scripts. They could all look like the same kind of transaction, which would make analysis more difficult. So yeah, and of course, Wasabi Wallet is a great way to try to delink coins from their past, which is also useful. So yeah, there are a lot of advancements recently about privacy, and I think people should take time to learn about those.
All right, you've got are you going to do that podcast regularly now? You just debuted a new podcast the other day.
Yeah, so me and Lawrence Nahum from Green Address, we started a new podcast. It's called Reckless Review, and you can find it on recklessreview.horse. And what we do is we speak about, we try to make the technicalities of Bitcoin more approachable. We really, grind down into the technical details, but we try to make it in a way that people can understand what we're talking about. And we also like laughing about everything in this space because the space is hilarious. Let's face it. Taxes or not, everything here is hilarious. So yeah.
That is an awesome breaking down the technical stuff so everyone can understand it. I think that's that you're striving for that. I wish you much success. And it's Udi is linked to below. His Twitter is linked to below, so he's retweeted about the podcast and everything on there. All right, Boris, I'll let you have the final words. Any subject matters, any stories you wanted to share? Final thoughts?
Yeah, if you talk about privacy, people think that it's just one thing. Privacy isn't even a technical issue. Privacy has many faces. It means something different for everyone. And that's one of the things I took away from your podcast. You always say that. I mean, personal responsibility is the new counterculture. You have to think as a user about what it is that you want to keep private. The rest, you share it with the world. But if you think about that, you'll find the means for it, and Bitcoin is already there. The means are there to be private, to transact anonymously. It's everything is there. Just people don't know how to find it, and the real problem is that they find out years later that they should have thought about privacy before that. So if people are watching and are figuring out what privacy is, just take your own responsibility and try to think ahead. That's the most important thing.
Very good advice there. I like ending it with a personal responsibility as a new counterculture comment there. Okay, dudes, thank you very much for being on the show. Pound that like button, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed it. We do this show every Friday. I will be back in the USA next week, so it'll be at a USA friendly time, and the West Coast guests are going to finally be able to return to the show because they're all asleep now in LA. I mean, we haven't had like an LA guest or a San Francisco guest since the entire time I've been in Israel, but I will be back. I will be in Los Angeles next week, so it'll be different. But of course, everyone in England and Israel and Europe will be asleep by the time we get. It's a Bitcoin world, people. I love it. I had a blast here in Israel. It's not over yet, but I'm going to leave soon. So thank you. Go to the Tel Aviv Bitcoin Embassy. You can see Udi there quite often on Sundays. I run into him all the time there. And he saw me actually running on the streets of Tel Aviv also. So I've definitely become part of the community here, definitely. But they're very friendly here. All right, dudes. I'm Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, Disrupt Meister. Bang that bell button to get a reminder when we go live. Well, maybe if they want to send you a reminder, YouTube. Pound that like button. DisruptMeister.com. Follow me on TechBalt, TECHBALT on Twitter. Shabbat Shalom. I will see you guys tomorrow on our regularly scheduled show. Bye-bye. See ya.